Hey everybody, Hunter back again from Showtime Studios. We're going to move on to the next part of the build tutorial that we've been working on. And before we get started in this one, I'd like to again thank everybody for all the interest in this series. And a lot of guys are tuning in, and I find it kind of funny that I'm doing a tutorial series, geared more toward the beginner and the intermediate modeler, but I have a lot of the seasoned veterans that's subscribers on my list, watching the videos all the way through. So that's I'm kind of really surprised by that. So I want to thank all you guys that are sitting here, listening to me, explain what I'm doing and that, and it's kind of baffling. I never thought the more seasoned guys would do that, but that's great. That makes it worthwhile on doing these videos, knowing people that are interested in them and are willing to watch them. So that's cool. So what we have is where we left off in the last video. We were doing some fill work on the chassis up here where it had the hollowed out frame rails on the top. And I got everything else cleaned up, the rest of the mold lines and stuff taken care of. And I went ahead and shot this in a coat of gray primer. And I did that for a reason because I'm going to explain as I go along, especially in this step, and also answer some questions. So I went ahead and got this in a coat of gray primer. And what we did, for anybody that hasn't seen the video, but if you haven't seen the video, you need to watch that part because this is the next part of the series. So you don't want to miss any information here. You can see back here where the frame rails are hollowed out, and up here they're now filled in and solid and look like a frame rail. So we did that just ahead of the firewall, up to basically the radiator. We got all that filled in. It looks good. Now another question that came up is, that modification right there, would that still be considered box stock? Yes, it is. Filling that in is a matter of putting putty in. If you get into the thing of fabricating a panel or something to put over top of that, then you're getting into the gray area, and that only goes for competition, and aesthetics. I mean, if you don't mind those hollowed out frame rails on the top and you're a beginning modeler, hey, don't worry about it. And like I said in the previous video, some of this stuff that I'm going over in the steps, I don't really recommend for somebody that's starting out. Worry about cleaning things up, making things fit, and then glue it together. Get some experience that way, get a couple builds under your belt, and then you can start going in and doing these modifications and things like that. I know years ago, I would always say, and I'm still a firm believer in this, and being a judge at the competitions and stuff, you see a lot of guys that, they come in and they build one or two models, or they build they're working on their first model, and they're going out and they're buying all this aftermarket stuff for it, and they're trying to kit bash and do all this stuff. That is totally the wrong way to go about it. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. I'm not trying to discourage anybody, from having fun in the hobby, but it's not the proper steps to take. You need to learn the basics. You need to learn how a model goes together. You know, there's a lot of things that you really need to learn just putting a kit together rather than modifying it and cutting it up and kit bashing it and doing the stuff that the more seasoned guys do. So, in this case here, like I say, getting back to the question of whether it's box stock or not, yes, this is box stock. And another thing that I made mention of was I was going to take this center rib out of the hood, um, and just kind of shave this down and get rid of that center rib, but keep the trim on the sides. And I was asked if that was going to be considered box stock. If all you're doing is shaving this down with a piece of sandpaper, yes, that's still considered box stock. Now, a judge may walk up and go, well, wait a minute, that had a center rib in it and you modified it. Not really. If that center rib has an up and down spot in it, or if it had a flaw in it and you sand that out, you're sanding a flaw out. You're not modifying the part. So, that there is another gray area. But as far as my builds and most of the shows that I go to, over 10 different states, you know, shaving this down and just sanding that rib out is still going to be considered box stock. It's an assembly procedure and not really a modification. So next we'll move on to, of course, I got the chassis. Like I said, I got all the mold lines and everything out of the chassis. We got the putty sanded down, and I went ahead and shot this in a coat of primer. And the reason why I went ahead and done that before I glue any other parts to it is that allows me to look at all of what I call the body work, all the basics that I went and done, and make sure that, you know, when I get ready to spray this thing in paint, that all of this stuff is looking pretty decent. And if you wait before you put this in primer and hang all the suspension and all that stuff, and then try to primer everything, if you've got a spot back in here or back, you know, in this area underneath the control arms that still needs work, it's real hard to get into. So I go ahead and prime this, and that's going to lead into another question that came up of whether you can glue, or whether I glue parts that are painted, or do I scrape the paint off of them? When I'm priming and painting, I never scrape the paint off of anything. And I have models that have, you know, thousands of miles on them going to and from shows, and I have never had a part fall off yet. I've had a couple damaged models, but as far as, you know, a model failing from a glue joint or something like that, I have never had that. And of course, in this build on the front control arms, they are chrome. And I'm going to show you another thing that a lot of people are asking about. And a lot of people say you can't do it. Well, I have to disagree with that. We're going to do it on camera. I'll show you how it comes out, and we'll deal with that when we get there. So what I'm going to do is, on this particular build, I'm going to give a little bit of a hint there for, or a little trick that I use. And this can go out to the beginning guys. It can also go out to the, you know, the seasoned guys. The way this front suspension is set up on this street rod is you have individual control arms, uppers and lowers, and the spindles. And if anybody knows what the three-wheel stance is, all of us modelers have had models that, you know, when you put them together, you end up where one tire doesn't want to sit on the ground. Well, there's a way to kind of prevent that as you're building the model. You have to be very careful with what you're doing. You have to pay attention to, you know, how things are indexed and, you know, how they go into place. So I was looking at the control arm setup, and the lower control arms actually have a pin that sticks out the side of them. And it's just a very small pin that sticks out the front edge. I think it's this one right here and this one here. And what those little pins do is that's what the stabilizer bar sets on. Well, the stabilizer bar is here on the parts tree, and we're going to go ahead and clip that off. Let me flip down my magnifiers here so I don't cut half of it, cut it where I don't want to cut it. That wouldn't be good. We don't want that. So we're going to go ahead and cut that. Why am I using these things? Where is my good clippers at? There they are. I don't know where I picked those things up from, but I don't want them. Okay, we're going to cut that stabilizer bar off of there. And as you can see on this thing, there is two flat points, one here and one there. And when you put this into place on the chassis, there's two pins on these little mounts right here. Well, those pins, I can get my fingers to work tonight. Those little pins will go into the holes on the frame, just like that. And if you look across this area right here, if we can get the camera to zoom in on that, well, it's probably not going to zoom in on it standing up on the end like that. But these two little pieces sticking down here, that's what you want to use to level your control arms. And if you level the lower control arms and put the spindles in and get them seated down in the holes evenly, your front suspension, when you set it down on a level surface, both tires are going to sit, you know, totally flat on the table. But it kind of reverses the steps a little bit because they want you to put the control arms in first and then put the stabilizer bar on. But what we're going to do is go ahead and clean up the mold lines on the stabilizer bar. And here we go with this again, more scraping and sanding, as Fordmeister said, making reference to Pete. And sanding and scraping, that's about all we do on these models. But it's all good. And like I say, just let everybody know this is going to be another one of the longer videos because we are going to do some, the prep work right here on camera. A lot of people really seem interested in, how I go about sanding and scraping, but uh, it is pretty much the same process no matter what you're doing. It doesn't really change. And a lot of people will not mess with a little bar like this. They'll say, you're not going to be able to see much of that. And that's true. I mean, if you're building for yourself to put on your own shelf or whatever, and you can't see underneath that model, or, you have people looking at that model that don't know what a mold line is, um, you know, don't worry about it. Don't even, sit here and spend the time to scrape all this stuff out. But like I say, with me being, in competition, this is something that I have to do on any model that I'm going to put on the show table. Um, it's just one of those things that once you start doing it, you have to do it on every model. And, even though I highly recommend doing all this cleanup and mold lines, injector pin marks, and all that, I mean, you don't necessarily have to do it. You can just put the model together and have fun with it. But the only time it comes into play, like I say, is when you get into competition and stuff like that. And there's a lot of guys out there that'll build a model and, they'll come to their first competition and then they kind of gripe because, well, why didn't my model place? My model was better than this model. And, you go over and talk to them and you show them that, they've got a bunch of injector pin marks showing and mold lines showing everywhere and the paint's not even. And, and they get upset and they get kind of discouraged. But that's why I try to let everybody know if you're going to, if you want to build a real good model, all this stuff has to be addressed. Let me see what we got here. We're moving right along with the sanding and scraping. Okay, we've got that part cleaned up pretty good. And like I say, I did paint or did put this in primer for a reason. I think it was Ford Meister that asked me about gluing parts to, not only paint but chrome and stuff like that. So another good thing about putting something in primer, especially your chassis, and I learned this from the big truck builds and stuff, because on those, pretty much every component on the chassis is the same color. Your cross members, your rear ends, your springs, the steering box, everything is the same color. It's almost like doing an armor build. But if you kind of stop like on the main frame assembly and go ahead and put it in primer, it tightens these holes up a little bit. And as you can see, with no glue, that stabilizer bar does not drop out of there. So what we're going to do is go ahead, and this is one of the things that I've been asked about. Will the parts adhere once you have paint or primer or clear or chrome or something like that down first? Will the adhesive grab on and have a strong joint? And that's kind of I guess, a two-part answer to that. Yes, the glue will grab on. Do you have a super strong joint? No. Do you have a joint that is going to stay together to and from shows or normal wear and tear? Yes, you will. And what I mean by that is, like this stabilizer bar, there is no load going on that bar. At any point in time, there is really no load going on it. So even if this is not a super strong joint where you'd have to rip the plastic apart to get it out of there, it's not going to fall apart. But hopefully that kind of explains it. And as we go along with this build, I'll show you some more areas that we do that on. But I went ahead and put the stabilizer bar in there like that. Now I have these two pins right here to be able to line up my lower control arms. And once I get the lower control arms sitting against those pins, when you set the model down with the front suspension and everything, your front tires should be on the ground. So we've got that in. The next thing that I'm going to go to is the lower control arms, and they are chrome. So we're going to snip a little bit of this extra plastic off of the ends of them here. Get rid of that. And now I've got to check my part numbers, especially on control arms and stuff for you beginners out there and the intermediate guys that haven't done a lot of this, that may not understand a lot of the components on a car. Make sure that you look at your reference, your pictures, and use them for a reference, and also look at the numbers. So what we're looking at here is I'm working on the driver's side, which will be what they consider the left side of the vehicle. So I want to work on this control arm right here. So they're saying that control arm is number 505, and it's for the left side. It's the lower A arm. So we want to come over to the parts tree, and we're going to clip off number 505. And as you're, doing your prep work and stuff on this, just remember that this is the left side control arm. Now, this is chrome plated. Now, this is where you get into a little bit of a headache. It's chrome plated, but the chrome plating is right over top of the mold lines. They're there. And I've had a lot of people tell me, well, it's chrome plated, I can't clean it up. Well, that's not true. If you're going to make a good model, a higher quality model, you're going to have to get rid of those mold lines and get everything ready. Whether you do this, send it out and have it re-chromed by like Chrome Tech or Little Motor Car, or you're going to spray it with a Spastic or an Alclad or something like that. But it's still basics. Even though they chromed it in the kit, if you're going to build a real nice model, you're going to have to go in and clean all this stuff up. For the beginning guys out there, go ahead and glue the model together, get some experience on how parts and stuff go into place, and then start worrying about getting this kind of stuff cleaned up. Once you're into about 3 or 4 models, then start working on your basics. So we're just going to go around the control arm here. We're cleaning up the mold lines. And of course, when you do that, it will take the chrome. Where am I at? There I am. It will take the chrome off of the side of the control arm, which it's not going to focus in here, of course. You can see the white plastic there and then the chrome. All we're doing now with the chrome is just taking it off of where the sprue attachment points were and where the mold lines are. And I'm probably not going to sit here and do this on an entire video because these are a little bit time consuming. We may do just one side to keep the video a reasonable length, but I'm not going to do both sides on camera because, like I say, it's the same steps. Once you do it on the left side, it's the exact same procedure on the right side as far as the cleanup. Now, what I may do is get the rest of the parts cleaned up and we'll assemble them on camera. I'll meet everybody in the middle. A lot of guys want me to do all the assembly steps on camera and all the cleanup and stuff. Well, how about I do half the cleanup on camera, half off, and we'll come back and assemble stuff on camera. That'd be kind of the best of both worlds, I think. Okay. And we got one more spot back in here to clean up. Actually, we got 2 more spots in here to clean up. Because whenever you have a round tube with a mold line in it, it's going to be on both sides. So you also have to clean up on the inside of the component just like you do on the outside. And sometimes on the inside, it's not as critical because even in a competition model, a lot of times you can't see the inside of it. So you have to make a decision at that point in time whether or not you want to go through all this headache of doing this. But we're just sanding and scraping, as Pete would say. Okay, I've got all of the flaws taken out of the lower control arm. As far as the mold lines and things like that, we don't have any sink marks in this one, so that's a good thing. So the next thing that we want to do is index the control arm the way they want it on the instructions. And as you can see on the instructions, there's a airbag mount right here in the center. And then there's three little indentations in the control arm. They're showing them there. If you flip the control arm over, there's no little indentations. So study your pictures real well for you beginning guys out there. Study the picture real well and study your part and make sure that you have it going the right direction. And from what they are showing on here, that should be the right direction. At least I hope it is, because that's what the instructions say. And as many of you seasoned guys will know, that's not always true. Reading the instructions and sticking with them. But I am looking at what's going on here, and I'm not 100% sure about this. I've got to study this a little bit more because I'm not liking the way that this front suspension is wanting to go into place. Okay, we're going to get one more component out here. All the joys of doing this live on camera. Everybody can look at all the stuff that I go, why does that work like that? Or how does that work? But all you guys have done this for a while, you know what I'm talking about. You'll look at the instructions and go, well, that ain't going to work. And then you'll look at the parts and go, well, that ain't going to work either. And then a lot of times we end up coming up with our own way to do it. And sometimes that's worse than the screwed up instructions. But we also have a mold line on the, just like on these airbags here. And of course, with my main subject that I build, heavy commercial, I'm used to doing a lot of airbags with the mold lines. They're quite entertaining to clean up. Actually, most of the truck kits that I do, the airbags are in two pieces. So you're not just cleaning up a mold line, you actually have a seam to clean up. So having these in one piece is kind of refreshing, really. So we're going to go through and just clean up the mold line on the spring. Now, another little tip, and this goes out to not only the beginning guys, but also the seasoned guys out there. This is another little trick that you can do. And even if you're going into competition, this is something you can kind of cheat on a little bit. When we put this airbag in, and if you have like a two-piece airbag or something like that, or even in the case of this one piece, if you don't get this seam or this mold line cleaned up perfectly, remember where the mold line is. Like in this case, the mold line is going this direction right here. So when you set that in place on the model, the airbag itself, when you index it, set that into place and make sure that the mold line is staying going this direction. So that way you don't have the cleanup that you done. Like right now, I have the mold line going this way. So if anybody picks up the model and looks underneath of it, you can see the front of the airbag and the back of the airbag, and that's right where that mold line was. So what you want to do is just kind of rotate that, and that puts the mold line or the body work or whatever you did to clean that up, it puts it against the back of the spindle and also against the cross member, and it puts the nice clean edge out here where it's visible. So that's a little trick for everybody to remember, and that's one of the little tricks that I use that I've learned over the years and learned in competition. And I'm just sitting this into place now, just kind of roughing it in and looking at it. Okay, now I understand a little bit more of what's going on. We are going to have to do some tweaking to this front suspension, I think, to make everything sit right. I'm holding the control arm into place where they want it, and I am finding out that I don't like the angle of the front suspension, but oof, and the control arms are facing uphill like crazy. Yeah, it will actually work because I've got that pin that we did on the stabilizer bar is sitting down against the top of the control arm. Okay, and we got the spring cleaned up pretty good. Now, I'm going to do that one thing that everybody says that you cannot do, and that's actually go in here while I'm holding all this in one piece. Now, getting back to the chrome that's on the control arm real quick before we move forward. A lot of people ask, can you glue chrome parts and have them stick? The gluing surface of a chrome part should really be scraped and cleaned where you're going to put that another piece down to it. So if you're going to make a glue joint on a control arm or on anything chrome, make sure where the two pieces are coming together that you do clean that off. Now back here at the back of the control arm where this finger is, I'm holding it against the front cross member. We've already cleaned that up in that area because we took the mold line out. So we're down to bare plastic there. So what I'm going to do is I've got everything pinched together here, and I scraped off the top of the control arm right here where the stabilizer bar is going to sit down against it. And we're coming in with our Tamiya extra thin. And as you can see, I am gluing to that primer. And it will bond. You will not have an issue with that. And another thing that I'm doing right here is I'm taking the Tamiya extra thin and I'm wiping over top of that mold line that we did some sand or scraping on. And what this Tamiya extra thin will do is actually melt the plastic just a little bit. And if you drag a brush across it, it'll help smooth out that joint. So that's what I'm doing with that part. And then next, we're going to come underneath and we're going to drop a little bit of the extra thin at the cross member. And we're going to glue that control arm into place. And then I'm going to drop a little bit through into this mount where the spring is, or where the airbag is, and get that glued in. Now, as you can see here, there's two different things going on. Actually, three things going on. We have bare plastic, we have chrome, and we have primer. And I am gluing those together. There will not be an issue with that. You can do it. You have to, really pay attention to what is being glued to what, but it can be done. It will stay together. Um, there's a big theory out there that you can't do some of these things in modeling, and sometimes you probably shouldn't do them. I'll be the first to admit that. But sometimes we just want to cut a few corners and make building a little bit easier. And just like what I'm doing here, that's one of the corners that I found that you can cut a little bit and make everything work out and still look decent. Put a little bit more extra thin up here on this upper bracket. And we're going to put a little bit down here. Now, it looks like I'm putting a lot of glue on these parts. I'm not. If you notice when I pull the brush out of here, I drag the brush across the top of the bottle right here, or the inside of the bottle. So I have very little adhesive that's actually being transferred to the parts. So it looks like I'm putting a lot on, but like I say, I'm actually not. So there we go. I mean, that's what we have. You can pinch everything together. Try not to get your fingers into any of the glue points, especially this Tamiya extra thin, because it will leave your fingerprint in it. But there you go. I just flipped that upside down. Let's see if we can get a shot here on the camera. Camera, there we are. Well, we were there. Camera. There we go. There's the airbag assembly sitting in there. Of course, you can see the stabilizer bar that's in there. And we'll flip this over, and you can see the chrome on the control arms, and then we glued it there at the cross member. We'll stand it up on the end here, get a view of that. So yes, it will. You can glue chrome, you can glue to primer, and you can glue, bare plastic to primer or bare plastic to chrome, as long as you just, scuff a little bit of the chrome off if you're going to glue to it. That's all you need to do with that part. Now, a lot of people that are watching this are probably going to say, well, what are you going to do with that chrome part? You didn't strip it. Well, what I'm going to do with that chrome part is the same thing I'm going to do with the rest of the chrome parts across the front suspension. I'm going to leave it as is. And when we go over to the spray booth to shoot the next coat of primer on this, I'm spraying right over top of that chrome. And there's people out there that say you cannot spray over top of chrome, paint won't stick to it. That is a theory that is not true. Um, I will spray the primer directly over top of this chrome, will not have an issue. It will never flake off. 10 years from now, that paint will still be on there. Prime example of that is the engine that we worked on. This upper intake, these rocker covers or the cam covers on both sides are chrome underneath of this paint. I've actually went in with enamel thinner to get off the extra Tamiya panel line accent color, and the paint is still stuck to it. So, that's one of the little tricks that I use to speed up building sometimes. A lot of guys will ask, how do you build so fast? Well, I learned some of these tricks that you can do, but a lot of them are kind of, people hear me say that I do something, but they don't believe it. But this right here, the control arm that we just left chrome, in fact, Sandy is going up right now. This is something else. I have a camera on my laptop that's actually built into the laptop, and it's sitting over here to the side where I'm pointing that way. And I have the camera that's up here that you all are looking down on. And I'm also getting Sandy to get me another camera that I'm going to set up over to the spray booth area. So we're going to run the cables and everything, add that into the remodel in here. And when I go over to the spray booth, all I have to do is select the camera on my laptop, and I'll be able to show you guys everything that I'm spraying, what I'm doing at the spray booth. The camera has a microphone on it, so that's going to be great. So what we're going to do with that is I'm not going to do any more priming on this chassis from this point. Uh, and we'll get the rest of the front suspension and stuff together. I'll go ahead and clean the parts up and get all the mold lines and stuff out of them. We'll come back into another episode. We'll assemble those parts. They'll be chrome just like this. And then when we get ready to do the priming on the chassis and the rest of the components, it's going to be on camera at the spray booth. And I'll show you that you can go over top of chrome without a problem. So there's probably some guys sitting out there going, nope, it won't work. He's full of it. He's lying to us. False information. I do it all the time. It's just one of those things that you have to kind of pay attention to what you're doing. But this engine right here is a prime example. I mean, like I say, this upper intake and these cam covers are chrome underneath of that paint. And I can rub my finger across it. I can take a polishing cloth to it, which I already have, and it will not come off. Now, if you try real hard to get it off, it will come off of there. That's true with anything. If I rub real hard on a piece of bare styrene that's been painted, the paint will come off. So, but you can on these little small parts like this that are chrome, put them together, shoot right over top of them. I learned that technique years ago working on the big rig models, especially AMT. If you've ever built one of their tractor kits, uh, they give you, I don't know, 30 pieces of chrome that goes on the engine alone. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to sit here, strip the parts of the chrome, and then clean everything up, put it on the engine, and then basically paint it all one color. So what I started doing was just cleaning up all the flaws through the chrome and gluing the part into place. Once I got it looking good, got all the mold lines out and all that, I would glue the chrome part into place and move on to the next one. And when I was ready to put that thing into primer or into paint, I had an engine that was like bare plastic and chrome. I mean, it was ridiculous. And I learned the technique of going in with the primer and lightly misting over top of it. And after the second mist coat, you never had a clue that any of those parts were chrome. So that's a little thing that we'll show in an upcoming episode. So there might be some thumbs down over that. There might be some people that flat out do not agree with it. But like I say, I do it all the time. And I'm going to do it on this build right here. We'll show you how it comes out, and then you can be the judge from there. So that's about all that we're going to do in this episode. We're about 34 minutes. So I want to get this one cut off and get it uploaded. And I'm going to go ahead and finish cleaning up the rest of the parts that go in the front suspension. We'll do another episode. We'll glue all those together, and then we'll be moving on to the rear suspension. So again, I want to thank everybody for watching, all the interest in the in this series. It's been kind of overwhelming that many people are interested, but hey, that's what we're doing these videos for. So that's a good thing. So yeah, like I say, that's all we've got for this one. Stay tuned. We got some more coming up, and as always, I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.